round, a bullet live, because it did fire from the weapon and obviously caused the death of Mr. Hutchin and injured Mr. Souza.
Sheriff, for live rounds found in other guns on set,
how much will you take into account the previous accusations of unsafe practices and negligence on other sets? We know you go for this set, but there are reports coming out from Hannah and David of negligence and unsafe practices on other sets. How much will you take that into account?
Well, that's up to the district attorney to determine how much that's going to weigh, but we are going to follow up on some of those statements that are made, that there were other incidents. We definitely want to speak to anybody that has any information in reference to safety issues on further sets, or whether there were other issues, and we would encourage them to call the sheriff's office at 505-986-2490 with any information they may have, so we can get a good idea of what the totality of the circumstances are on this set and what's happening in the industry.
Sheriff.
And that is something that will play into our legal analysis when we get the completed investigation from the Sheriff's Department. It obviously could play into whether charges get filed or not.
Sheriff, you're obviously sheriff responsible for
negligence and the things. I know you said it's too early to comment on charges, but can you speak broadly to what your office is examining when it comes to an accidental shooting versus weighing negligence, like what your office specifically looks at when we get to that point?
When we get to that point, yes, I will speak to it. I don't know that we are at that point yet, because again, we can't say that it was negligence by whom, how many people were involved. We can't say that with any certainty at this point. So when we get to that point, yes, I will speak to that.
Sheriff.
What type of gun was used, and were they target practicing that earlier that day? Can anyone address that? Can you talk about what caliber of weapon that was used, and also there's been a lot of chatter about were they target practicing some crew members earlier in the day or the day before? Can you talk more about that?
I will talk in reference to the caliber of the actual weapon that was fired by Mr. Baldwin. That firearm was an F. Lee Pieta long Colt .45 revolver. There was other ammunition in the gun that we believe was fired by Mr. Baldwin.
Sheriff.
the other guns that you've recovered. I think that's an important point. Any other live bullets in any of the other guns, including the one that you recovered from Alec Baldwin?
As of right now, there were 3 firearms that were located on the set within close proximity to the incident. We're still going to determine. We'll send the firearm that was fired by Mr. Baldwin to the crime lab and do a functionality test. Obviously, it did fire a live round. The other weapon is a single-action Army .45 revolver. That one looks like there's some modification to the cylinder. It may not be functioning, but that'll be determined by the crime lab. The other firearm is a plastic, non-functioning revolver.
Sheriff, the revolver that was used, Sheriff, the...
I won't talk about specifics, but we are aware of those rumors or those statements that have been made, and we're going to do the best to track those down.
Sheriff, for clarity,
there was a search warrant that was issued in reference to any camera footage. There was camera footage, but I can say that there was no footage of the actual incident.
Sheriff, for clarity.
How much did Mr. Alex Baldwin's role as a producer factor into the investigation? How much responsibility do you think he actually had as a producer, and how could this influence the investigation of possible charges?
I think once we gather all the statements of fact, once we do all the interviews, then that will be weighed by the district attorney to see exactly, what weight that's going to give in reference to her decision to make charges.
Sheriff.
And the movie set being pursued or executed?
Not at this time.
Excuse me, Sheriff.
Please give us an update on Alec Baldwin, in particular from law enforcement view, how he's been so far.
Just generally, he has been cooperative in this investigation. I won't comment on my perception of his demeanor. Won't comment on that.
Clarity, was it a live round or a suspected live round?
I'll say right now, until it's proven by the crime lab, it's a suspected live round that was fired, but it did fire from the weapon and it did cause injury. So that would lead us to believe that it was a live round.
You speak to just the idea of public safety here on movie sets. Sheriff, you're obviously responsible for safety in this county. Just curious about your thoughts about the use of real weapons on the sets of movies.
Well, obviously, I think the industry has had a record recently of being safe. I think there was some complacency on this set, and I think there are some safety issues that need to be addressed by the industry and possibly by the state of New Mexico, but I'll leave that up to the industry and the state to determine what those need to be.
Two of the three guns were non-functioning guns.
Or is there precedent for a case like this in Santa Fe County where you have somebody who fired a gun, it was clearly accidental, he thought it was a cold gun, but other people loaded that gun where it's kind of not the person who actually fired it, but could be held liable? Is there any kind of precedent for a case like this in your county?
No. No, there's no precedent whatsoever.
Into your investigation, I mean, it's a tricky legal battle.
It is a very complex case. It will require lots of legal research and analysis and review. That's what my team is here for, and that's how we're assisting the sheriffs at this point. That said, again, we don't know how that's going to play in until we get that complete investigation.
Sheriff, question for you. Sheriff, two of the three guns.
Sheriff, was the projectile taken from the director's shoulder, removed from the director's shoulder? Is that the same projectile that killed Elena Hutchins?
We will leave that up to the Office of Medical Investigator to determine, but it's apparently the same round.
Sheriff, Sheriff, can I ask you?
Whether there was consequences on set, are you investigating whether people were recreationally shooting on the ranch property aside from filming?
We are aware of those statements, and we are investigating whether or not that is true or it isn't true. And I would encourage anybody that has any information that any target practicing or any firearm was discharged away from the movie set or for practice or for whatever reason to contact the sheriff's office.
Sheriff, two of the three guns were non-functioning. What do you think happened here then?
I'm sorry?
You said two of the three guns appeared to be non-functioning on that table. What do you think unfolded that afternoon?
Well, I think the facts are clear. A weapon was handed to Mr. Baldwin. The weapon is functional and fired a live round, killing Ms. Hutchins and injuring Mr. Souza.
You know, in this latest search warrant that was just released through the magistrate's office, it notes that Hannah Gutierrez-Reed and Joel and the AD that handed the gun all said live rounds should never be on set. Yet there clearly were live rounds on set. So this feels almost like a false statement to police. If the armorer is going to say that there should never be a live round on set, yet there was, what's your next step as a law enforcement investigator in this?
We know there was one live round as far as we're concerned on set. We're going to determine whether we suspect that there were other live rounds, but that's up to the testing. But right now, we're going to determine how those got there, why they were there, because they shouldn't have been there.
Can you confirm that you've
Is
interviewed?
Alec Baldwin still in New Mexico, or has he left the state? Or any of the other crew members who are involved in this?
I'm sorry, who were you asking about?
Alec Baldwin, has he left New Mexico, or is he still here so we can interview him, or is he?
He's been cooperative. I'm not exactly sure of his presence whereabouts.
Can you talk about the path of the gun that was fired, how it wound up on the cart, and what you know about the chain of custody before it was picked up by the assistant director?
I won't talk about the specifics of that. That's still being investigated.
Sheriff, just for clarity, were there multiple rounds in that weapon?
I'll stay away from an actual timeline. I know, based on what I said, there's several individuals that need to be interviewed, and from those interviews comes new information that we need to track down. So I don't want to put a timeline on it. I want everybody to know that we're working diligently. Our investigative team is to wrap this up thoroughly and completely. And so there is no timeline. We want to get all the facts, get all the statements, and present that to the district attorney's office for
Can you
review.
confirm that you've interviewed Armorer Hannah Gutierrez-Reed and the Assistant Director Dave Hulse?
We have.
Do you expect to bring interviews to either of those two?
As questions come up, other information comes to light, there may be follow-up interviews, and so I would suspect that we would want to re-interview them.
Sheriff, you said there was a small number of people inside the area where this happened. How come it's taking so long, almost a week now, to get all of those interviews done?
Well, there was a small number of people within the set area where the incident took place. Those people have been interviewed. I'm talking about 100 people on scene in different areas. So those people that were in close proximity to the incident, they've been interviewed.
And just for clarity, inside the revolver that Alec Baldwin used, were there other live rounds inside the chamber?
Not that we're aware of.
Question for the DA. Madam, the sheriff used the word complacency on set. What is the bridge, and how much do you have to go beyond complacency to get to criminal negligence, hypothetically speaking?
I'm not going to answer hypotheticals today. I will say there is a bridge, and it will take many more facts, corroborated facts, before we can get to that criminal negligence standard. And again, they're gathering that as we speak.
Complacency in itself does not amount to criminal behavior.
I can't say that without specifically legally researching that, but my off-the-cuff answer is no.
And for the sheriff, your experience with firearms, Sheriff, what is your view of such complacency on the set of a movie?
Anytime firearms are involved, the safety is paramount. I'll say that. Anybody knows that. If you know anything about firearms, anytime a firearm is around or about, safety is paramount.
Does it anger you that live rounds were being used on that set?
I don't let my emotions get involved. This is an investigation. We rely on the facts. Thank you.
How many people were actually in that room? You said a small number of people. What is a small number?
The information that I received from the detectives, there were 16 people in the vicinity of where the incident took place. Thank you for all your questions. I really appreciate it, but I think that's all the questions we're taking today. Unless the DA would like to entertain any more.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, DA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, your keys?
You said it's got me
Hey man, how's it going, dude?
Good to see you, man. I just wanted to say hi.
Right.